Hello and welcome to, well, the beginning of a new series, actually. We're going to be starting a Unity programming series. I know it has been kind of highly requested, actually, believe it or not, in the Discord. So here I am. I'm going to be jumping into a Unity programming, well, it's going to be a series. Basically, let's see if I can pull up the document here. I went ahead and just made a small little thing to remember what I was doing. We're gonna make like a simple little Mario kind of like platformer similar to Mario, not exactly. We're gonna keep it simple because this is a beginner series. We're gonna be using Unity. Basically, what you're gonna be able to do is you're gonna be able to go from start to finish in every level. You have to avoid spikes, lava. Okay, you also don't want to fall off the map, and you can move side to side, and you can also jump. And the player can also collect coins as points, and that's gonna be kind of the idea of the game. I don't actually have a pre-made. Some series on YouTube have a pre-made thing, and they'd show like a little clip of it right now finished. But I'm not gonna do that. We're just gonna. I'm gonna try to wing this. Okay, we're gonna learn together. We got this. Hopefully, I can help you guys learn how to do Unity. I actually go to college for this stuff. If you're new to this channel, I do go to college for this stuff. I'm going to college for computer science, game development. It's a very fun time. Very, very fun. So anyway, we're gonna jump right into it. If you do not have Unity installed, please go install Unity. Just go to Google, look up Unity, and you should be able to just to find the Unity Hub and download that. I might leave a link in the description of this video if I remember to. I'll try to leave links for everything. Anyway, we are going to do this in the old fashioned way here. We are going to do it with version 2020.1.10 F1. Now, honestly, it doesn't really matter too much on what version you're using as long as it's recent. You see, it's a recent version, whatever the newest official release is or whatever. Doesn't really matter. Um, anyway, we're going to name this the tutorial project. I think that's pretty good. It's going to do 2D. Make sure you specify 2D. And we're just gonna hopefully just hop right into it. We will probably be using like 2D lighting and stuff like that, which if you're new, don't worry about it. We'll get to it in a few seconds here. Actually, we're gonna do it right off the bat. Oh man, this is gonna be exciting. This is really, really exciting. I have been waiting to do something like this for a long ass time. While I'm waiting for this thing to load, look at the background. Look at that. That is absolutely beautiful. I don't know if you guys can see this. You should be able to see it. Oh man, is it gorgeous? Oh, see if I can get a nice. Ooh, look at that. Look at all that red. Yeah, so that's Wallpaper Engine for you. If you don't have Wallpaper Engine, you can find it on Steam. It's like $5. Good time. You can do a bunch of fancy stuff with your background. I don't know why Windows doesn't have this built in. It. I think Windows would allow for something like this built in, but apparently you have to pay for it on Steam. So yeah, that's a thing. Okay, so I have Unity opened up here, as you can see. Mine's black. Okay, that's because I have the black theme enabled. If you're wondering how to do that, you can just go up here, I believe. You go to Preferences. I think it's Preferences. And then, yep, Editor Theme right here, and you just click Dark. And then, bam, you got the black theme. As long as you're on the recent version of Unity's, you should be able to do it for free. You used to have to pay for it. Um, Also, I kind of realized my web camera is a little bit in the way of some important information over here. I might actually move my webcam downward for this. Let me go ahead and do that really quick. Woo! Look at me go. Okay, yeah. I'm gonna be right down here. Maybe. I think. Yeah, I think that's the better place to have it. I mean, I'm still gonna be in the way of some information, but I think down there's the best place for this in this case. Anyway, let's figure this out. So if you're new to Unity, okay, there's a bunch of different tabs here. I'm gonna close some of these extra ones that you don't need to worry about right now. Asset store will get rid of you well. And so basically, this is your workspace. In here is where your game window is and your scene is. Basically, you do all your editing and stuff in the scene view. And the game window is where you watch your game when you're playing it. I'm actually going to change this to 16 by 9. If you do not have this setting right here on your game window, change it to 16 by 9. If it's on free aspect or something, which it probably is if you're new, change it to 16 by 9 because that's like the normal standard monitor size ratio, basically. It's the aspect ratio is what it is. Um, but yeah, you want to change that to that. But anyway, your scene view is where you do all your editing and stuff. You can click and move the camera around if you wanted to. If you just do something like this with the transform tools, stuff like that. Um, so anyway, with this all set up, we're gonna quickly go down here into our project window down here. This is where you can see your files and stuff. Like, so you have the scenes. I'm gonna make another folder just by right clicking, and you just go to the old folder here, and we're gonna make one called scripts. Okay, good. Now that we have the scripts folder in there, we're going to do a few other things to get set up and ready to go. We're going to rename this scene that we're currently in. I'm gonna call it game scene or just game. We'll just click reload when you save it. Anyway, so now we have the scene. It's okay. It's named game. Good. There's a few things we also want to do. We want to go to window. We gotta go to package manager because this is where we got to get a few things. We got to get something called Cinemachine, and we also have to grab the universal render pipeline, which is going to allow us to do lighting and cool fancy effects in 2D. Although I don't know when we'll get to that, but we're gonna have it ready to go. Is basically what I'm trying to do. Anyway, we're gonna if you don't see anything showing up, just click on the packages and click Unity Registry. Click that. You should get a crap ton of stuff here. So if you scroll down, find Cinemachine, click Install. Then we gotta scroll down, and Cinemachines is gonna do its little installing thing. Just let it do its thing. It's we kind of need this in order to do simple camera movement really easily. In our case, we don't really need to make a camera script. That's fine. That's why we have Cinemachine. Um, if you're new to this, you'll figure that out as time goes on. Um, anyway, what was? Oh yeah, Universal Render Pipeline. Yes, right here, Universal Render Pipeline. Look for Universal RP, and then you click Install, and that's gonna install a bunch of fancy stuff as well. Okay, so once the universal render pipeline is done installing, you can just close this window by clicking the X. Now, what we're going to want to do is, well, basically, we want to get the universal render pipeline installed and ready to go. So if you're new, don't really try to question too much about what I'm doing. It's really not that important. Even I don't entirely know what it all does in the inner workings of things, but I just know how to set it up and get it working. So anyway, you just want to do create, and then you go to rendering, you go universal render pipeline, and you click pipeline asset. Then just go ahead and enter. You don't need to name it. It'll make these two things in here in your project area. Do right click create and just go to rendering again, universal render pipeline, and click the 2D render experimental one. Let's hit enter again. So now that we have this installed and ready to go, what we want to do is click on your universal render pipeline asset, which should be the middle one here, and then just click and drag your 2D render into this right there. Perfect. And then all we have to do is go to project settings, I believe, and then you click graphics, and then see here we have a little slot for our render pipeline asset. Just drag in the one that we just added, and bam. Look at that. Now we have 2D lighting installed. Not that that's too important right now. We'll get to that eventually, but we had to get that out of the way. We also have Cinemachine in here, which means we can slap the Cinemachine camera into view. So let's actually create a 2D camera. Just go up on the top right, Cinemachine, you click 2D camera, bam. Look at that. We have a camera right here. And then we actually don't need to do anything with this right now. Let's just center it and go ahead and save your scene just by right clicking on the scene. You just click save scene. Um, Now what we can do is actually we can make a player. We can start getting the movement going. So all you have to do is right click in the well, in this area in the hierarchy. You can also right click out here. No, you can't. Okay, you just right click in the hierarchy area, which is this window, and then you click 2D object, or yeah, and then you click sprite. Now we have the sprite in here. Just go ahead and rename it. We can just name it player, I guess. I mean, in our case, I guess the best option actually isn't to do this. I guess we can delete this actually here. The best way to do this is just create an empty object instead and name it player. Then go ahead and center it just by right clicking on the transform here and clicking reset. And now we're gonna click on our player, just click on him so he's blue, and then right click on him as well. And make sure you go to 2D object and click sprite. And then we're gonna rename this graphic. See, now what we just did, if you're new to Unity, is what we did was we made a child object of the player object, which means that basically they're attached. Um, so yeah, they move as one, but they're separate objects in the game. Basically, it's kind of hard to explain, but you'll see what I mean. So basically, here actually, I'll try to show you. So when I move the player object like this, okay, the graphic object is actually moving with it. Back in here, I'll put something in here to let you guys see it a little bit better here. Um, Whoop, whoop, nope. Hit tab, Dylan. Okay, there we go. Okay, so there's our graphic and our player object. Okay, so when I move the player object, which is the parent object, as you can see, I'm dragging around the graphic with it. Okay, so this is important because now if I were to click on the graphic object, I move it. Say I move it over here. See, it looks like it's moving the actual object, but what's actually happening is child object is the one that moved, not the actual object, the other object itself. It's kind of actually There's no real good way to see this without me just recentering it like this. See? So, like, previously it was at 6. Okay, so that's where the child object actually is. But if I went backward and moved it back to 0, it's at 0. And that's because, like I said, the child object was basically shifted away from the parent object, which I guess in better terms to explain this, the child object position is separate from the parent object, whereas this is so hard to explain this is just so hard to wrap your head around. Okay, I guess the simplest way to say this is the child's position is based on the parent's position. So, like, let's say I move the parent over here. The child can actually be offset from the parent wherever I want. So let's say I move the child down here, and let's just quickly make it so you can see the parent object here. This is important for people that are new because they need to understand the difference here. Let me just go ahead and make this 3 by 3 good. Okay, let me zoom out here. Okay, as you can see, we have two objects. Okay, well, yeah, it's two objects. We have the child one, which is the big dot down here. Then we have the parent one, which is the one over here. You see how the parent object is on the left and the child object is on the right. Now, if I were to make this value on the child object 0, the x value, suddenly it's lined up with the x value of the parent. And if I change this to 0, then suddenly the child object is right on the parent. I can drag them around like this. They're both together. That's because they're kind of linked. And when you make something the child of something, their position becomes a local position, which means it is kind of linked to whatever the parent is of it, but then it gets offset a certain distance. That's what basically that means. Anyway, enough of that. I'm going to get rid of the sprite render on the parent here. We're going to actually reset the transform back to here. And this is the graphic, which means we're going to actually lower this to the 3 by 3. Okay. Now, with all that explanation out of the way, editor, you can go ahead and chop that up until it makes sense to you. I don't know. That was a horrible explanation, but I tried. Anyway, so what we want to do is we want to get the player to actually, well, jump. And the way we're going to have to do that is we want to make another empty object, or make another child object of the player. We want to call this the hitbox. And what this is going to do is it's actually going to contain the hitbox that you would hear about in like Call of Duty or something. What we want to do is have a box collider. So just go ahead and click Add Component and type in box into the search thing. And as you'll see, you see a box collider and you'll see a box collider 2D. We are in 2D, so we want to click the 2D option. And another thing we want to do is do Add Component and do Rigid Body 2. Now, what these two things are going to do is actually kind of fantastic. Unity has its own built-in physics system, which means we don't have to deal with calculating our own physics. So that's very nice. Box collider just basically means it can contact surfaces. And rigid body is the fancy and important thing here because it actually allows us to, well, move to gravity, I guess, if that makes sense. It allows us to add gravity to an object. So what we want to do here is just to be sure of things like working and stuff, I'm not going to explain too much of what interpolate is, but you want to turn this to interpolate. You want to turn the collision detection to continuous because discrete is like the cheap way of calculating physics, and then continuous is making absolutely sure that the physics is being followed. And for the player, we want that. For anything else, usually not, but for the player, yes, we want that. Anyway, let's go ahead and right click and save. Now, what you're going to see if I play the game is the circle is actually going to fall out of frame. At least good. I'm not really sure. Hang on. Let me see what happens here. Okay, that's cool. That's cool. There's nothing that shows up on screen. That's cool. Nice. Actually, what I'm going to do is, where's the camera? Why is the camera not -10? What the hell? Okay. Oh, never mind. We got to change this to the if you are doing this, basically what we just did was our Z position of our camera is supposed to default to -10 the Z direction. I don't know why it didn't, but it should. Go ahead and change that. You want to change the one that says CMVCam1. Just in case it didn't default to -10, you want to do that because otherwise your camera's not going to see the object here because 2D is actually, this is going to blow your mind if you knew, 2D is actually in 3D, as you can see. So if you, I just clicked off the 2D thing here so I can look. But as you can see, it is actually in a 3D space. And as you can see, the camera is looking at the 2D object right here. And what happened was the camera was actually, instead of being positioned here, it was positioned way over here where we actually couldn't see the circle. And that's not a good thing. Okay, we don't want that. Anyway, I'm gonna pop it back into 2D. Um, as you can see, we can now see our dot here, but watch what happens. The dot doesn't move. That's interesting, isn't it? It's actually not moving because the rigid body is not supposed to be on here. I screwed up. The rigid body is supposed to be on here. Put it on the parent object instead. Change the collision detection to continuous and interpolate back. Um, the reason why is because there was a good demonstration there. The hitbox object was actually changing its value. If you go back in the video, you will notice the Y value over here. Okay, the Y value back in the video was actually changing. It was going down, I believe, because the child object was actually falling because I had the rigid body on it. And that's not what we want. We want the parent object to fall. Now, the weird thing is the colliders actually can be on child objects, and they still work just fine. But rigid bodies need to be on the parents. And I just wanted to show you that the child objects can fall separately to the parent object, so it can be bad. That can be bad. We don't want that. So you just want to make sure your rigid body is on the parent object. And now we will watch the ball fall off the screen. There she goes. Just like that. And it's going to keep accelerating, as you can see. It's going to keep accelerating until it hits something. If it doesn't, it just keeps going. Anyway, so we got that. I'm actually going to put a global 2D light in here. That's why our dot is black. So just right click, go to light, go to 2D, and click global light 2D. And there we go. Now we have a white dot. That's the 2D lighting, that system that got added into Unity. It's really fancy stuff, actually. But now we're going to get to the juicy stuff. In order for our player to be able to actually sit down on ground, we got to make the ground. So, I'm actually going to go ahead and import some free art, I guess, maybe, or I could just actually, you know what? You know what? What we'll do is something fancy. We're going to create another folder. We're going to do this as sprites. Inside the sprite folder, we want to right click, go to create, and where is it? Sprites. And then we want to do a square. And then we're just going to call this grass. See, now I've made us a little white square here. And I believe it is 4 pixels by 4 pixels, which it is. Sprite mode, single. The sprite mode between single, multiple, and polygon. I don't know what polygon is, but multiple and single. This basically just means there's one sprite in here versus multiple sprites where you can have a sprite sheet. In our case, we only have one sprite. Leave the pixels per unit alone. And I believe that is everything we need to do. Then we just go ahead and click apply. Then what we want to do is we're going to make something called a tile map, which is going to be kind of fancy stuff. So what we're going to want to do is right click in our main project down here again, do another folder called tiles. Okay. Organization in game development is extremely important. Okay. Trust me, it can get a little bit hectic as things go on, and you will find out the more we spend time doing this. And we're also just going to make another folder in advance called prefabs, which we will learn about later, probably in another episode. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and create the tile map. My goal for this episode is to get the player moving. So we're going to go ahead and create a tile map. And as you can see, I made a little grid here. Basically, what we're going to want to do is rename this tile map ground. And then we're going to want to give this tile map a tag. Click tag up here on the top right and click add tag. Click this little plus button here under the tags thing, and we're just going to type in ground with a capital G. And now we can just give the tag ground to the grid object or to the tile map object. So now what we're going to want to do is go down the add component here and type in tile map collider 2D. And then we're also going to want a composite collider. I'll explain what these are here in a minute after I get everything set up. We're going to want to change rigid body 2D to static. And that basically means that the rigid body is still simulated, but it doesn't move, and it kind of speeds up the processing of stuff like that. We're going to want to click on the tile map collider 2D, click use by composite, check that box for reasons that I will explain later, and we should be good to go, I think. Yes. Okay, so now if you don't have this tile palette menu open, click Window, go to 2D, then click Tile Palette, and it'll open up the Tile Palette menu here. Where what we can do is we can create a new palette, and we want to create a new palette. And we're gonna call this like I don't know, level design. I guess we'll call it level design. I think that's pretty good. Create, and just click on the tiles folder that you made. Just click that, use that. Um, Now, what we're going to want to do is it wants us to drag in a sprite from our assets folder. So just go ahead and do your thing here, double click on sprites, drag this in. And what you're going to want to do is want to go to your tiles folder and just click that and click open and click save. So now we have a little square here. So this is very, very important. What we can do is we can actually paint ground with this. And I'll show you kind of an idea of how this is going to actually work. But what we're going to want to do is we're going to paint the ground. We'll just do a simple little wall like that. I think that looks pretty good. I think that'll be fine. Yeah, I'm thinking that's fine. Okay, so now we have ground. Just to show you what that means, I'm going to actually go to the inspector here. And as you can see, if I zoom in really close, it's kind of hard to see. I don't know if you guys can see that on YouTube or not, but there's a little green line, right? If I can get rid of my tile painting here. Right there. Do you see that green line? It's very thin. I doubt you can see it, but there's a green line there. Basically what that is the collider of the ground. And what that means is our little player here is going to fall down and he's going to hit the ground. And that's kind of like the whole point of the ground. Anyway, you're probably wondering, why is the ground green? Well, there's a very, 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 very fancy thing we can do with tile maps. And actually, we can do everything like this with sprite renders as well. What we can do is if you go to the tile map and you see this little thing called color and it's white, you can make it any color you want. In this case, we're going to make it green. And we'll make it like a nice darker green, sort of like that. Okay, I think that looks fine. If you go to our game view, yep, that looks like ground to me. And, well, I think that is good. I think we're good to go. There might be one more thing actually I want to do, and that's to restrict the rotation. Yes, okay. On the player, if you go to the player object, rigid body 2D, go to constraints. There's a little drop down here. Click that, and we're going to want to freeze the rotation in the Z direction because we don't want the player spinning around. Okay, that's not what we want. If you wanted to play around with that on your own, you could eventually, but first we got to get the player moving to do, which is the goal for this episode. So anyway, see now if we were to click play and the player falls, see he hit the ground right there. Actually, what's going on here is the player's hitbox is too big, as you can see. Can I actually shrink this? Let's shrink this down. Let's shrink it like right down to there. And perfecto. Okay, now when we hit play, you'll see he falls right onto the ground. Boop, just like that. What I just did there was there's this thing called Edit Box Collider or Edit Collider. You can just click and drag these little things to kind of shrink the collider. Anyway, we're gonna save. So now that we have a thing that can fall and stuff like that and walk around, or actually it can't walk around yet, but it can fall. Now what we want to do is make it so we can actually move around. So this is where things get kind of fun. What we want to do is on the player object, the parent object, just click add component. Okay, we're gonna type in, I don't know, player movement. This is gonna be the name of our script, player movement. And what will happen is it'll say new script, click that, and then you click create and add. So then it's gonna add the script to the object itself. Give it a minute, it has to initialize. Then we're gonna double click it. It's gonna open up in Visual Studio, more than likely, unless you have a different thing selected for a code editor. This is where things get very dicey. So now that we have this open, we're gonna do some really quick, fancy stuffs. Just go ahead. We're gonna use something called serialized field. If you're new to coding, just try to follow along. I'll do my best to explain stuff after I get done typing it all. So we're gonna want to get a reference to the rigid body. A reference is basically like a, it's kind of like getting an address to something. Okay, if that makes sense. It's like getting your friend's address. Okay, in this case, I'm getting the address to the rigid body on whatever this script is asking for. So anyway, we're gonna do that. We're also going to do another serialized field, and we're gonna do a float speed. If you're new to coding, a float is more or less just the number with a decimal at the end. More or less, it's like a more accurate number. There's also another thing called an int. If I typed in int random here or something like that, an integer is just like a single number, so it'd be like 1, 2, 3. A float number can be like 1.5 or like 0.37 or something like that. That's what a float is. There's also a bunch of other stuff like doubles and stuff, but you don't need to worry about that. Right now, we're just gonna worry about this. So we got the speed, we got the rigid body. Anything else we really need? I don't think there is another thing we need. Um, Actually, there is another thing we need. We're gonna do a non-serialized field. We're just gonna type in vector 3, and we're just gonna call it movement. What that is basically a vector 3 is like having XYZ. That's what a vector 3 is, like XYZ. A vector 2 is the same thing without the Z, so it'd be XY. But in this case, we're just going to do XYZ because there's a bunch of different things you can do with vector 3s that you can't really do with vector 2s as far as I'm aware. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and we're going to type in the thing awake, and it should autofill if you just see it awake. You want to make this function here. What it is the same thing as the start method down here, and as you can see, it says start is called before the first frame update or the first frame. What it is, it's kind of like a setup phase, and awake happens just before that setup phase. And what we want to do is anything that's locally done or anything that gets like anything that processes on a local game object or one that's on the game object the script is on, we want that to be put in awake. If anything involves other objects that are not a part of the parent and child of this object or whatever, then we do it in start. So if it's like if the player wants to talk to the enemy or something like that, we don't put that in on start. Or no, we don't put that in awake. We put that in on start. It's a little confusing. You'll understand it eventually. Anyway, in the awake function, we want to do RB, which is the name of our rigid body. We just do get component. Actually, no, we don't need to do that because we're getting a reference. Do we even need this? I forgot we have a serialized field. We can just drag it in. Yeah. Okay. Well, never mind. Actually, I don't think we need the start function either. Huh. I just did all that to explain stuff to you guys. Okay. So what we're gonna want to do here is this is gonna be a little weird. I'll explain it to you in a second, but we're gonna do movement.x is equal to input dot get axis raw, then do a what you want to call it? Oh my god, I can't think of the name of it. Holy crap. Quotes. There we go. Do quotations, and we're gonna do horizontal. Okay, and then we're gonna do the same thing for vertical movement as well. So we're gonna do movement.y is equal to input.get axis raw vertical. Now what this is gonna do is actually kind of fancy too. What we're doing, in essence, is taking your arrow keys, WASD keys, and storing whatever the values are into this movement vector. You don't really need to know entirely how that works. I'm not entirely sure how they calculate all this stuff, but get axis raw basically just makes it so if you're holding the right arrow key, then your movement is a +1. If you're holding the left arrow key, the movement in the horizontal direction is a -1. That's basically what it's doing, and it's just storing it into this vector 3. That's all it's doing. So, what I'm going to do is something called a comment, and we're just going to do get movement values. We're going to put that above here. If you do 2 slashes like what I did here, a double slash, that means any code on this line, it gets ignored by the computer itself or when it runs the script. So this actually doesn't matter at all. This is just for my own reference. Anyway, so we have the movement. And we're doing this in every frame. That's what the update method is. Update is called once per frame, or like it's just called constantly. So if you're running at 60 frames per second, it's called 60 times in a second. Basically what it is. Anyway, so with the movement, now what we want to do is we actually want to apply velocity, but we don't want to do that in update method. What we want to do is do it in the fixed update. This is going to be a little bit confusing, but fixed update is not called every frame. It's like the physics update, and since we're using the Unity physics, we want to use fixed update. So go ahead and make a fixed update. Technically, we could do it in the update. We could, but it's not really the right thing to do. We're going to do it in fixed update. Okay, so I went ahead and did this. First, I didn't want to like fiddle around and waste your guys' time trying to figure out how to do this. But it took me a little bit to click. I haven't done a platformer in a while, so I had to think about it for a second. But anyway, I got it. So what you want to do is type in rb.velocity. Because basically what we're going to do is access our rigid body's velocity, because like I said, that's what deals with the physics. And we're going to set that equal to a new vector 3. If you're new to coding, you don't really need to understand too much of what new vector 3 means. Just all it is it's saying, all right, we're going to just make a value of vector 3. And what we're doing is we're making that value vector 3 equal to the movement.x, which is what we got up here from the input. So it's like our player's input in the horizontal direction times the speed value that you have. So however fast we want the player to be going. And then we're going to put a comma here. And what it is that's the x direction of this vector 3. And then it's going to move on to the y direction. The y direction that we want is just whatever the player's velocity is in the y direction at the time, which would basically just be gravity. So just put rb.velocity.y. That's just basically getting its current velocity in the y direction. And then we put 0 as the z vector because we don't want to deal with the z location in vectors. And like in 2D, we don't deal with the z location very often at all. So anyway, we're going to set all that equal to the rigid body velocity. So if you want to go ahead and type all that out, you can. Very, very fancy stuff here. Not really. It's actually pretty simple. Anyway, we're going to go back and going to click on your player, like the player object. And in here, you're going to have the player movement script. You have the RB and the speed. What you want to do is just click and drag your rigid body into here, and it'll glow blue like this. Let go, and it'll link it. And change your speed to 5 for now. It's just a testing value. And then we should be good to go to actually see our player moving. So let's just take a look. Look at that. See, we can move side to side. Perfectly fine. Actually, I could implement jumping, but I think I'm going to leave that for the next episode. So anyway, I hope you guys are going to enjoy this. Leave a like and subscribe to see more, and leave any questions you have in the comment section. If you run into any problems, leave questions in the comment section or join the Discord. There should be a link to the Discord in the description of this video. Join the Discord. It's a good time. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Leave a like and subscribe to see more, and I will see you in the next Unity tutorial. Bye-bye.